There I am.
There you are. Yay. James is here. Everyone, let's give James a round of applause and thank him for joining us. Oh, that's fantastic. All right. I'm going to start right in by introducing James. James is a travel artist, an urban designer, an author, and an educator. He is a former professor of design and drawing and an advisory board member, a blog correspondent and instructor at Urban Sketchers. His on-location sketches and watercolors have been widely published, shown in group and solo exhibitions, and seen on NBC Nightly News. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. His award-winning book, Freehand Drawing and Discovery, is a text in design schools worldwide. He is a frequent visiting artist at universities, a keynote speaker for conferences and symposia, and he travels globally to teach concept drawing and urban sketching workshops. Welcome, James.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting to be your first interview in this series.
I'm really excited. Well, you know what? Oh, and also I just want to say happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Very good. Excellent.
These are difficult times. We're all of us quarantined at home and cooped up, and it's frustrating and it's a scary time and so on. And so I think, you know, now's the time to pull out our pencil crayons and our watercolors and to have a little fun sketching and to figure out how we can be creative, and we need some creative inspiration. And so I'm hoping, James, that you can talk to us a bit about making art in adversity. I know that you've had to do that several times.
I find myself in that situation a bit, actually, and I'm not really sure why, except that when you travel as much as my wife Patty and I have over the last 20 years or so, 45 some odd countries, and a lot of it is during the worst time of the year from a weather standpoint. So we've had some oppressive conditions to deal with. We've had a broken down Land Cruiser 200 miles from nowhere in Kenya. But this hurricane thing, I think, probably tops them all so far.
Okay, good. All right, well, then we want to talk about that. So that was Hurricane Irma, right? What year did that happen in?
That's right. That was 2017, exactly 2 weeks after Patty and I moved into our new place in Florida from Texas.
Okay, and you're in Florida right now, right? You're down in Key West?
That's right.
Okay.
We're in Siesta Key.
Siesta Key, okay. All right. Well, what happened? Tell us about it. Tell us what your experience.
Well, I had grown up in New Orleans, so hurricanes were not unknown to me. We had to stay at home through a few during the years that I was growing up. So I wasn't particularly intimidated by those. I knew that if things started looking dicey, we'd have to leave. And in fact, that started to happen. So we grabbed up, you know, bottled water and some food and a few other things. And I grabbed my sketchbook and paints and headed out. And the funny thing about Florida, what I hadn't counted on for the evacuation, is that everyone in Florida is going the same direction to get out of there.
Right.
On the same highways, fighting for the same gasoline, buying the same food. So I decided just to hole up in Lakeland, which is the highest point in that part of Central Florida. And gosh, the storm kept getting closer and the sky got darker, and I was pacing around a lot, and actually my wife threw me out.
Oh.
She said, why don't you go find something else to do? She was afraid I was going to eat all the food, I think. And the first thing I did was go downstairs and just draw the other refugees in the lobby of the hotel, because that seemed like the kind of thing that I would typically do. It was elbow to elbow. There were so many people. There were lots of folks that had been headed to Disney World.
Okay.
That ended up in that hotel. So lots of tourists. And as the sky started getting blacker, I walked outside. This was a Hampton Inn. They have one of those big portico chairs over it, about 16 feet off the ground, with an overhead structure, but open on all sides. So lots of wind was whipping through there. And I started a series of sketches. I thought it'd be interesting if I could find a view where I was relatively covered overhead, even if the wind was whipping through the sides, where I could kind of document in a sequence what was going on.
Cool. James, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Of course.
I just want to ask, can everybody see and hear James? Is anybody having problems seeing or hearing James? Okay, so there's quite a few of you that I can't see you. And I'm, for example, Barbara Aguchi and Beverly and Renee and Daria and Diane, Steve Main, I can't see you. And I'm hoping that you can still see us. And I have no way of knowing if you can see us or not. If you're having problems seeing, please type, or hearing, please type that information down in the chat. There's a little chat bubble at the bottom. Yes, Melissa, you need to adjust your volume at your end. And okay, Barbara, you're here now. Okay, so I guess it's people can just decide if they want to turn on their camera or not. All right, okay, so I'm gonna assume that everybody's fine. And if you are having a problem, type it in the chat box on the bottom. And also we have to finish up by 4:10. So go ahead, James, tell us what happened after that.
What happened after that was I started the first sketch based on what I can see. And I'll just show you quickly. This was a series of 4 that I ended up with, but I started here because that's what I could see at the time. There were some palm trees, some vegetation in the foreground. This Hampton Inn was kind of a shopping center, and so you could see the buildings in the background there, and the sky started to get kind of dark and ominous, right, which is shown in that sketch. And there's some little time notes on the bottom of that. I think this one was at 10:40 in the morning or something like that. And okay, got that done, went up to check on Patty, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose within the next hour.
Wow.
And this was the next scene. This was when the first big band of rain and wind started coming through. And take a good look at those palm trees, at how they're bending and the direction that they're blowing, because
right,
that's going to change.
Yeah.
You also see a lot of splatters on there.
It was raining.
First I thought, well, it was raining very hard. And at first I thought, oh no, I've got to cover up my paper. And then I thought, no, we'll just baptize these drawings. And I actually went out and held the sketchbook for just a couple of seconds out in the rain and said, ah, good, got it.
And were you working with watercolor or ink?
No, well, both. That's pen and wash, kind of
okay,
ballpoint, and then just some watercolor right on top of it, which is why you can see some of the ink, or rather some of the watercolor run by some of the raindrops. So I went back in for a while, and not much changed. The wind direction, rain, all that, until the eye passed over about, what we would consider supper time, 6 p.m. or something like that, something in that range. And I went back down at about 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was very, very black. That's the scene that wow, you can really see that the rain is starting to blow sideways. Those pretty palm trees are shredded and in tatters, but you can see the parking lot lights off in the distance, and you can see reflected light on the palm trees. We never did lose electricity, thank goodness, or it would have been a completely different story with all those people in the hotel.
Right.
We didn't get any windows blown out, which I was very, very thankful for. But this was the one that has consistently gotten the most attention, I think, just because it's the most dramatic looking. That's not the last one, but okay, as I was drawing this one, a local TV news van rolls up. And the reporter gets out. Her name was Melissa Marino, and she was wearing a ball cap and slicker, and they were all dressed up in their rain gear, asking why I was out there. And there were a few other people standing around taking pictures with their cell phones. Everybody rushed her and said, look at my cell phone pictures. And she looked over and she looked at me and said, what are you doing? So I showed her the sketchbook. And, well, what is this? What can people do this? What are you talking about? So it was an opportunity to tell her about Urban Sketchers, and she brought out the lights, got the camera guy, and we did an interview right there on the spot live.
Right.
And it was very cool. It was an opportunity to talk about Urban Sketchers, to talk about the kind of things on a day-to-day basis, but the fact that, you know, we're really founded and rooted in journalism. And so telling news is just kind of second nature when you find yourself in that situation.
Right.
We're
not so fast though. We're a lot slower than taking a photograph or a video with your phone. It's like kind of slow news, the slow jam news.
Well, that's true, but I have learned to get very, very fast when you're getting rained on or chased by cars or some of the other things that might be going on. That segment aired again at 10 o'clock, and I didn't go back outside until things started to break up a little bit. The next sketch I actually did was this one at about 9 the next morning, and it really struck me, having been a kid that grew up around hurricanes, because that was the first time the blue sky opened up through the clouds, and I thought, okay, things are probably going to be all right. And if you look closely, you can see birds down in the corner.
Yeah.
When the barometric pressure drops and the wind picks up, the birds leave, and they do not come back until they think that it's safe. So that was symbolically a very good thing to have happen. So altogether, we've got just a nice little kind of sequence of these things that go through.
This is called reportage, right? It would be considered reportage.
Yeah, I think this would. There are lots of instances, I think, where we're covering single things. I don't see too many with time lapse, and I'd like to see more people do that type of thing. Kind of the same idea as a time lapse camera. Take the same scene, do it several times at different timestamps, and just see how the scene changes, especially in a situation like weather or something like that. It would have been very interesting to go to New York and do a sketch a day of what downtown New York looked like when people started going home.
Yeah.
And sheltering in place for the coronavirus. That would have been a very telling sketch. Maybe someone can do one the opposite, when people start coming back.
That's right. And, you know, I've seen lots of images on TV of people in apartment blocks in Italy, and they're all out on their balconies and they were singing to each other. And that's wonderful. And that would make a wonderful subject for documenting what we're going through right now. A sketch with people out on their balconies and singing to each other and so on.
Well, I think that that's true.
So David C, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right, asks, do you feel like you were in danger at that time when you were sketching?
You know, that's really interesting, because I felt like I was more in danger, and this is honest to goodness truth. I felt more endangered in the hotel room than I did outside. And that may just kind of be a human reaction, but I was really worried about those windows crashing in. That had happened in my home when I was a child in New Orleans. And so I still kind of think about that type of thing. But when I got outside and started drawing it, there was this kind of metamorphosis in my mind. It kind of robbed the storm of terrifying me.
Okay.
You know, there was something about it. I felt in control. I wrote on my blog the next day, Irma was my bitch. At that point, I was the boss.
Right.
And yeah, so in terms of physical danger, no, not really. But I don't think it's because, I think that with the adrenaline, I just didn't think about it too much. It probably was not really smart. And I would never suggest somebody go out and do that type of thing. If you find yourself in a situation and it's right, why, sure, go for it.
Right. So did you mention what the wind velocity was at that time?
Honestly, all I could do was this. It was Cat 2 at
Oh,
that point.
okay.
It had already come up from Naples and was coming right through the center of the state.
Mhm.
And the eye actually passed right over where we had decided to evacuate to. So my planning wasn't great, but it was sufficient.
Yeah. So you were in the Siesta Keys. Isn't that really at the very bottom, the southernmost tip of the Keys?
No, there's a whole string of barrier islands, most of which are key islands. The key is the geology is coral, as
Okay.
opposed to just topography raising up out of the water. And there's a whole series of keys along the Gulf Coast, and we're right off Sarasota, about an hour south of Tampa.
Okay. All right. So do you have to, I've been to the Keys before, and I remember there was a huge long bridge that we had to go on to get to the southernmost tip. Did you have to
Right.
cross back, go up north on that bridge to get away from the Keys? To make it?
No, we were on the north side of that bridge, and really all we had to do was go inland
Okay.
to get away from the storm surge, and hopefully get to a place that by the time the storm reached us, the category would have dropped down to something that was manageable.
Right.
But I had not planned on drawing the storm.
Okay.
When we left and I picked up my sketch bag. I thought there might be an interesting opportunity to draw some debris or something after the storm. And it was just kind of thank goodness my wife threw me out of the hotel room, because none of this probably would have happened without that.
Yeah, yeah. And so what kind of materials were you using? It looks like your sketches were fairly simple, like really, really quick.
Well, they were, and as I say, they were pen and wash. And if I had been thinking in advance about drawing the hurricane, I probably would have, come up with some neat way of thinking about methods and materials. But I just picked up my sketch bag and headed for the car. So this is a pretty good one to look closely at. You can see some, probably ballpoint ink, and there's a little bit of fountain pen used on it, and then watercolor over the top. There's some rainwater splatters on it, and if you look carefully, I've used a white gel pen to indicate the direction of the rain.
Yeah, I can see.
And then did something similar here. Mm-hmm. And used some really thick cadmium yellow paint in that gel pen to indicate that the shopping center lights were still on off in the distance.
Cool. You mentioned once that that NBC News broadcast was broadcast again months later. Is that right?
Yeah. This was the people who found me were a local NBC affiliate.
Okay.
And several months later, one of the founders of our Syracuse chapter, Bill Elkins, who I'm told has a background in public relations of one kind or another, got Lester Holt and NBC News interested in urban sketchers enough to do a feature story. And once they started doing their homework, they realized that this was a worldwide organization. This wasn't just Syracuse or even just New York. This was all over the place.
Yeah.
And we drew in bars, but we also drew in the California wildfires and during the protests in Istanbul when the army came in when it was trying to run off the people who were trying to save the park. And in a couple of cases, drew in hurricanes. So once they found that out, they got in touch with Richard Shepard in California, with myself, James Hobbs in London, and put together a really, really nice piece. And when they talked about actually covering news was when those hurricane sketches popped up for my 1.5 seconds of fame.
So someone is asking, Lisa is asking, any sketches from the time you were stranded in the middle of nowhere?
There are. I wish I knew where they were. I was a professor for a long, long time, and I suffered from that absent-minded professor's syndrome. But I can tell you what the middle of nowhere was like. We were on our way from Nairobi out to the Masai Mara. Wow. Hundreds of miles across Kenya. in a Land Rover that I wish had been, or actually was a Toyota Land Cruiser, that I wish had been a little newer and better maintained than it was. And there was literally baling wire and, you know, duct tape and things holding things together. And at some point it just stopped. You know, no civilization for 100 miles at least in either direction.
Wow.
So our driver got on his cell phone and said within 2 hours, one of his cousins would come by in a pickup truck and they'd try to fix it.
Okay.
So I had plenty of time to draw the men leaning over into the engine and the smoke coming up and one of them saying, uh-oh, and whatnot. And about the same time that was happening, a young Maasai girl came through with a herd of goats. And
do you have this sketch, by the way? Can you show us?
I've got other sketches I can show.
Oh, okay.
But she completely ignored us until I showed her the book and asked if I could draw, at which point she smiled and held out her hand.
Oh.
Like, you pay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Wow.
This was not her first rodeo.
No. Oh my goodness. So what are some of the other situations that you've been in that have been like adverse situation where you would want to sketch, where you did some sketching?
Well, it's been interesting. Not too long ago, we were in Vietnam and found ourselves in boats as much as we were in anything else.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get that where you can see it. And when you're moving down a river on a boat with the current, there's no stopping, there's no slowing down. And I had learned in design school this thing called serial vision, which was a lot like storyboarding for films or computer games or something like that. But rather than pick a static view, do some really quick, almost cartoons of several views as they're passing by.
Right.
And I've since been in situations on river rafts and whatnot where that particular way of drawing came in really, really handy. So when time's a factor and when you don't have that stable a situation anyway on a boat or a raft, that works pretty good. And this is something I think that people can think about as they are kind of stuck wherever they are, is drawing kind of normal things around the house or where they might be out in the yard or something like that, and drawing them very, very, very quickly, rapid contour drawings, and just seeing what comes out of that.
Right.
In this case, I was drawing in a market in Saigon in Vietnam, and you can't stand there very long or they'll get mad at you for blocking commerce.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to draw as quickly as I possibly can and scribbled out the crabs and scribbled out the fish. And that evening came back and put the black fields around those things when I wasn't blocking anybody's way. And that became another way of trying to capture an impression very, 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 very quickly. And that was something that I was going to suggest to folks here. Is I showed some of these sketches, and I showed a wonderful book by an underground cartoonist named Linda Berry to a workshop audience I was teaching in Canada about a week and a half ago. And after it was over with, one of the urban sketching women who was in the workshop came up to me and she said, "You have just inspired me with a brand new idea. I didn't want to sit around and draw my living room, and I didn't want to sit around and draw fruit in a bowl. And I thought, why don't I draw cartoons?
Yeah.
Why don't I do panels of what my kids are doing and what the dog is doing and the conversations that we're having back and forth?" And this was what she had seen when she kind of got that idea of doing it. This is Linda Berry, who wrote, among other things, "Picture this: learn how to art with the nearsighted monkey."
Okay.
And there are lots of academic books you can read on creativity, but this one is one of my absolute all-time favorites.
Okay.
And
good tip.
she's talking about a sequence here where she says, WTF, what am I doing?
Yeah.
When I stop my hands and start to think, the whole creative process stops. But when I keep my hand and my pen and my brush in motion, the ideas come. So then she's asking, does it take some kind of motion for ideas to come into being? And I think most of the time that it does. And that's something I talk to my students about, that inspiration doesn't lead to action. Action leads to inspiration.
Good point.
And if you're sitting around wondering what to do, don't wonder, just pick up and draw.
Yeah.
And draw quickly and draw with abandon and see the types of things that come out of that. And from that, you can get some really interesting ideas to follow up on and make something out of that.
That's a good point.
I work that way a lot. And it's always better for me to jump in and start drawing without an idea. What does Mike Dukabara say? Sketch now and think later.
Yeah, Mike Dakubara, he's here. Say hi, Mike.
Hey, Mike. And he's got a very good book by that name.
Yes, he does. Yeah,
that whole concept to you.
He does, and I hope that he will let me interview. I've already asked him, so I'm hoping after today he will agree to let me interview him, and he can talk about Think Now and Sketch Later. So somebody is asking to say the name of the book again that you mentioned, Linda Berry.
Yeah, Linda Berry, and this is called Picture This.
Yep. And somebody else is asking what kind of sketchbook you use. What journal do you use? Yeah,
I'm always trying out different things, but my go-tos have been this A4 Moleskine watercolor album, because it allows me to do big double-page spreads.
Wow.
Like this thing of Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Or go in and put, 10 sketches on a couple of pages and really kind of tell stories that way.
Yeah, I think this is really fantastic, the selection of sketches that you've showed us, because there's a variety there. We've got some black and white, we've got some watercolor sketches, we've got the full page spread, and then you've got some little cartoon kinds of sketches. And so, if you're not the full page spread person, if you're not really a sketcher and you find it all a bit overwhelming, maybe start a little bit smaller and just do something smaller, maybe do a series of things, little vignettes around your home. And also I want to encourage people to go outside, go for a walk. Don't talk to anybody, don't go into a crowded area, but if it's possible, maybe find a secluded place and go for a walk. And if you're in the part of the world where there's good weather, bring your sketchbook and do a little sketching and just breathe deeply, some fresh air. And yeah, don't be filled with fear. We're going to get through this together. Does anybody else have any more questions that they want to ask James? I have 10 minutes left, and then we're going to, this platform Zoom will automatically end in 10 minutes. Any more questions for James? Just give people a minute to type if they want to.
Sure, that's fine. In the meantime, just so that I don't leave anybody out, all the hurricane sketches and a lot of other things I do are done on Stillman and Byrne beta series, which is really nice because you can rip them out and sell them on the spot.
Cool. So Lisa Hoffman asks, how does your sense of humor influence your art and life during times of adversity?
Well, I've actually never thought about that particular question, but I've got to say that my training in urban design, landscape architecture and whatnot, you've got to be an optimist at heart to do that kind of work. And I drew my way through that career for 40 years.
Yeah.
And the things that came out of that were typically places that were the types of places that I wanted to be in, that were happy places where people gathered and where there was lots of energy and whatnot going on. So that definitely comes out in the sketches. I think if you look carefully, I posted one just last week, and I'll see if I can find it here, of Venice Beach in Florida. And if you look carefully at that one, that definitely has to have a sense of humor with it. I wasn't prepared for finding that, so I'm not sure exactly where it is. But go to my Instagram, JR Sketchbook, and about 3 posts ago, there's an aerial view looking down on Venice Beach where I wanted to capture the beautiful people and the not as beautiful people and the groups of people and the individuals, because that's what was really interesting to me. And the more I drew, the more I felt like a cartoonist. Actually trying to catch that thing right there in that moment. And I would say I rarely think about something humorous in advance, but sometimes the drawings just turn out that way.
Well, I think if you're at the beach,
yeah,
it's easy to find humor, especially if you're looking on my towel.
Very true.
Yes. Oh, thanks, James.
I'm looking.
Okay.
Oh, here's one that probably a little bit of humor came out as we were at a tiki bar, entertaining some friends and looking around. And as people got up and went about their business, these 3 people were never at the table at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
There were different people, and they would get up and leave and rotate in and out. And that one just almost came out kind of cartoony, which wasn't a problem for me at all.
Yeah.
Oh, here we are. Here's Venice Beach.
Yes, I saw this sketch. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Super fantastic. But the thing that's wonderful.
If you look closely at the people there, it's kind of cartoony.
Yeah.
There's no getting around it.
I think, also if you're watching this and you're not an urban sketcher, you're not used to making art, and you're just kind of tossing around for what to do with yourself when you're locked in your house. I think James's art is also really a fantastic example, because he has given himself permission to not be photorealistic. And it's his interpretation of what he's seeing. And it doesn't matter if the person actually looked like that or didn't actually look like that. You're not doing portraits, right? You're just having some fun.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I tell people that we're not doing portraits and we're not doing figure drawing. Melanie Rain suggested to me one time that actually what she told to me was, she was looking at how I was drawing people 5 or 6 years ago. And she said, your people are bullshit. These are architecture people. These are not real people who live in this galaxy. There are real human beings. Look at that man over there. Look at how his back is bent. Look at how his body's kind of twisted. Look at that woman picking up fruit over there. Draw people like that.
Yeah.
And that actually inspired me to take a figure drawing class.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, that I ended up doing every Tuesday night for a couple of years, and that impacted my architecture. People were less dominant than the type of people that Melanie would have appreciated.
Well, James, thank you so much for chatting with us today. Already our time is over. We have only a couple of minutes left, and then this whole video is just gonna shut down. So I want to encourage people that we're in challenging times right now. And it's tempting to get discouraged, to be frustrated and anxious. But one of the reasons that we make art is because we know that the creative spirit within us makes us better than we are, and it makes the world a better place. And so that you can always make art. Everybody has paper and pencils and crayons and things lying around their house. Go grab some of those things and look out the window, look at your children, look at your pets, go for a walk in the woods, make some art and have some fun and relax and don't panic, because we're going to get through this together and it's going to be fine. Right?
Right.
That's right. Okay. And also, I just want to encourage people that I'm going to be talking to Lynn Chapman, a UK-based, she's an artist, she's a sketcher, she's a painter and a sculptor, and I'm going to be talking to her on Thursday at what time? Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time. And she's going to be talking about her process and how she, what she does. She's one of the most bubbly people and you're going to love her. So please tune in at noon. Also I want to encourage you to take an online workshop. Now's a great time to take an online workshop. Studio 56 has launched our first online workshop with Oliver Holler called Design on the Fly. And if you go to the www.studio56boutique.com, you'll find the online workshop there. And this week, we're hoping to publish our second online workshop with Ian Finelli. It's called Layers of Learning. It's in the final stages of editing, and that will also be at www.studio56boutique.com. If you're an artist and you're watching this, and you would like to be interviewed, I would love to chat with you. So send me an email at studio56boutique@gmail.com, and we can talk about interviewing you as well. Thank you so much, James. You're a wonderful, generous person. I really appreciate chatting with you. It looks like I have 2 minutes left. Do you have any final words for people who are tuning in?
You know, as I was picking up things coming in here, if you get tired of sketching, you know, if you're burned out and you've filled up a few pages, I love reading as much as I do anything else. And this is a time.
1 minute, yes.
This is a time when we might find some reading time on our hands. And a good artist friend of mine who asked a question actually a little earlier, Lise Hoffman, told me about The War of Art.
Yes.
One of the most inspiring things I have ever read. And
yes.
Lise, thank you so much for telling me about that. And I read this again and again and again.
Yes.
If you don't follow Austin Kleon and you're an artist, you should, out of Dallas, Texas. He's got a series of bestsellers. This is the most recent, and it's about keeping going during bad times.
Perfect. Thank you, James. I think you're going to get, I don't want you to get cut off in the middle of a sentence, but I know that we're down to the last few seconds. Thank you, everybody, for participating, for joining in, and come back to studio56boutique.com. We're going to have other interviews coming up, and we've got 60 seconds left. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.